If I hadn't gone to 42 Rosepine Ridge to fix that widow's lock, my life might not have been so strangely twisted. She was beautiful even at 39, but I shouldn't have walked into her house. It started with a broken lock, and ended with a part of me I'll never get back. My name is Eli Mercer. I'm 26, an independent repairman, living alone on the outskirts of Ashwood, a small town nestled between pine forests and foggy roads in Oregon. If you've ever driven through Lincoln or stopped at the Spruce Hill gas station for your morning coffee, you've probably seen my old pickup truck, silver gray with a faded sticker that read, "Mercer Fix It, Honest Repairs. Fair Price." I never went to college. My mother was sick, my father left, and I had to choose between school and life. I chose life, which meant learning a trade from an uncle next door. And then opening my own independent repair business. Nothing fancy, but clean and free. I could go wherever I wanted, fix whatever I wanted, and most importantly, I didn't have to bow to anyone. It was a cold morning, with gray clouds hanging heavy over the distant mountains. I had just finished a heating repair on a mobile home and was about to stop by the Waffle House near the highway when my phone rang with a new job. Client: Camille Hartman. Address: 42 Rosepine Ridge Drive. Request: replace the locks on the front door and 2 interior doors. The address immediately caught my attention. Rosepine Ridge was no ordinary place. It was a gated community of about 24 homes nestled deep in the woods. Security gates were always closed. Cameras were everywhere, and the homes cost well into the 7 figures. I had never had a client there before. People who lived in such areas usually had their own mechanics, or hired professional services from a large company. No one would call a handyman like me. But Camille Hartman seemed different. I confirmed the job, entered the address into the map, and drove straight to Rosepine Ridge. Her house was at the end of the street, set apart from the others. European-style sloping roof, white walls, wide wooden porch with black railings. There were no cars parked in the yard, and no sound came from inside, just the wind blowing through the old pine trees, and dry leaves rustling on the stone walkway. I walked up the steps and rang the bell. The door opened a few seconds later, and there she was, Camille Hartman. She was in her late 40s, but looked to be in her early 30s. The kind of woman who makes time seem to hesitate as it passes. Dark hair tied back at the nape of her neck. Bright brown eyes. Flawless even skin. She wasn't wearing anything too flashy, just a pale gray turtleneck. Dark jeans. Bare feet. But the way she stood, the way she looked straight into my eyes without flinching, it made me feel like I was lost in a carefully staged world. "Are you Eli?" she asked, her voice low and soft, like the faint scent of wine in the air. "Yes," I said, pulling my hand from my coat pocket. "Mercer Repairs. Are you Miss Hartman?" "Camille," she corrected, smiling. "Come in, I'll show you what needs fixing." I stepped inside. The door closed behind me with a soft, breathy click. It was warmer inside than I'd expected, and not just because of the heating. The way everything was arranged showed a refined but unpretentious taste. The dark green velvet sofa, the walnut coffee table, the small abstract paintings on the wall, the soft yellow lighting, nothing was out of place. No trace of clutter. A well-kept space, but one person lived there. "The front door lock is loose," Camille said as we entered the foyer. "I'm not sure if anyone has been playing with it, but it's been a little unsafe lately." I bent down to check. It was an old deadbolt, screwed into wood that had begun to rot slightly. If someone knew how, they could open it in less than 10 seconds. "I'll replace it with a steel core. And you can use the same key for both doors if you want." "Good," she said, and pointed to a white door at the end of the hall. "That door leads to the basement. And that one," she turned and pointed to the left, "is my office. I want them to have new locks, too. No fingerprints or anything electronic. I like things simple." I nodded. "Understood. I need to go back to the car and get my tools. It'll take about 2 hours. Do you need anything? Coffee? Tea?" she said. "No, thanks. I'm used to bringing my own coffee pot." She chuckled, tilting her head as if she were assessing me. "Independence. I like it." I didn't know how to respond, so I just smiled and turned away. I carried my things in, neatly spreading them out at the foot of the stairs, and started to undo the lock on the front door. Camille had disappeared somewhere in the house. I heard light footsteps. Then music drifting from speakers hidden in the ceiling. Old jazz, drifting like tea smoke. I worked in silence. Every time I removed a rusty screw from an old hinge, I felt like I was removing layers of protection from the house, and from its owner. I don't know if I was starting to feel strange about her, or if I was just curious, but I remember the feeling, as if there was something unsaid, quietly waiting for me to discover. I tightened my grip on the screwdriver. I began my work, as always, only, I didn't know that things would never be, as usual, again. I finished the job in exactly 2 hours. As I had predicted, each new lock was installed, the knobs turning smoothly and securely. I did a final check by closing, opening, and locking each door 3 times, a habit I had developed since my early days on the job. As I gathered up my tools and wiped my hands on a paper towel, I noticed Camille had returned to the kitchen. She was standing by the counter, the light from the window falling on her hair and shoulders like a soft sheen. She was pouring water into a glass, and when I entered, she turned and smiled. "All done," I said, setting my tool bag down on the mat near the door. 3 new locks, with keys. I double-checked each one. "Thanks, Eli," she said, handing me an envelope. "Here's a little extra since you came in so quickly." I refused in my mind. I didn't like taking money beyond what was agreed upon, but when I met her eyes, I said nothing. I just nodded. As I turned to get the bill and prepared to leave, her voice came softly from behind me. "Maybe you should keep another key." I turned, a beat too late. "Excuse me?" "In case I need to fix anything else and I'm not home. Or, even if I am." She said it with a vague smile. Not teasing, not quite serious, but enough to send my mind carelessly off track. She took a small, shiny silver key and placed it in my palm. "No pressure, no rush. I trust you," she added. "Be careful, and be quiet. People like that are rare these days." I didn't know how to respond. Thank you seemed too formal. Refusing seemed dramatic. In the end I just nodded, put the key in my coat pocket, and walked out of that house. My heart filled with more than suspicion, but also with something nameless, half curiosity, half confusion. The key lay in the wooden box next to my bed that night. I am not the type to speculate, but every time I tried to close my eyes to sleep, Camille's image would flash through my mind, her hair, her voice, the way she looked at me without blinking, as if she were reading something in my head that I didn't even know. I had been invited to coffee by women. I had received a few flirtatious smiles from older women, but something like today, never. There was something about Camille that didn't seem like a flirt. She didn't play games. She didn't exaggerate. She just said it, and let me decide how to interpret it. I couldn't sleep. I kept turning over, then getting up to drink water, then looking back at the little silver key. It sat there, making no sound, but filling my room with a different vibe. 3 days passed. I buried myself in work, fixing a broken heating pipe, replacing a ceiling fan in a student apartment, and helping an old man in the neighborhood re-tile the front walkway. Every time I thought I'd forgotten about it, I'd look in the drawer next to my bed at night. On the 4th day, my phone lit up while I was eating dinner. It was from a number I didn't have in my contacts, but I recognized it right away. "Camille, does the key work? Or are you still thinking about it?" I stared at the screen, my heart slowing. I typed 1 line, then deleted, typed another, then deleted. Finally, I texted back. "Never used it, but I still have it." The text came back almost immediately. "Good, if you're not busy. I have a bottle of Cabernet open. I can finish it." I stood in front of the house on Rosepine Ridge at 7:42 p.m. The porch light was on, the frosted glass door warm and golden. I had the key in my hand. It was as cold as the first time I touched it. I didn't use it. I rang the bell. Camille opened the door. Her hair was down, and she was wearing a thigh-length beige sweater. She wore little makeup, or no makeup at all. She looked at me for a moment before smiling. "Come in." We didn't do anything special that night. Camille poured wine, a nice Cabernet, full-bodied and spicy on the finish. She poured it into 2 tall glasses, then handed me one as I sat down in the armchair by the window. She sat opposite, her knees slightly propped up on the sofa, her feet bare, holding her glass in both hands as if warming herself from within. We talked, not about the past, not about anything serious, just small talk, the kind people say to each other to pass the time. Or to fill a gap. But the way Camille said it, everything had depth. Even the story about how she hated sliding doors because they were too noisy sounded very personal. I told her about silly repairs, like the old man who tried to force himself to unscrew the faucet, flooding the kitchen floor. She laughed, a real, full laugh, like a pebble dropped into a flat pond. I sat there, glass of wine in hand, and for the first time in months, I didn't want to leave a room. We kept going. Once became twice, twice became three. I came in the evening, after I finished my work for the day. Sometimes she texted, sometimes I just showed up, always knocking. Never a key. Camille always greeted me with a smile. No set schedule, no appointment. One evening, I asked about the house. How long have you lived here? Over 3 years, she said, looking up at the ceiling, as if counting the hours. My husband and I bought it for early retirement. But then he died in a car accident, a month after we signed the deed. I was silent. Camille didn't cry. She just put down her glass and sat there. No need to tell me more. No need to drag on. I understood. There are things people say not to tell, but to be seen. The first time I slept over was on a thunderous night. I wasn't afraid of thunder, of course, but it was unusually cold that day. And Camille said simply, "The road is slippery. Stay." I nodded. We weren't in a hurry. There was no rush like in the movies. Just two adults, sitting closer than necessary, in silence longer than usual. A light touch on the arm. A moment when our eyes met and neither of us looked away. And then it happened. We jumped into each other and had a wonderful night. I woke early the next morning. Light filtering through the sheer curtains of my second-floor bedroom. The room smelled of cedarwood and soft vanilla, the scent of this house, of her. I dressed in silence. When I went downstairs, Camille was sitting at the kitchen counter, wearing a loose white shirt, holding a cup of coffee. "You're up." "I was going to leave before you were awake," I said. "You don't have to." She raised an eyebrow. "I'm not a one-night stand." I didn't answer, but something about the statement made me feel better. I had coffee with her that morning and many mornings after that. We fell into an unnamed rhythm. I worked during the day, still fixing, still climbing roofs, still patching walls and installing pipes. But every time my phone buzzed with a text from Camille, my heart rate changed. She never asked, just suggested, "If you don't have anything tonight, I have pizza and a black and white movie. I just bought that bottle of wine you said you liked. It's a waste if no one else drinks it with me." Slowly, I started to take the initiative. I texted first. I dropped by unannounced, and she always opened the door. I still didn't use that key. Not because I didn't trust her, but because I figured, if I knocked, I was still keeping my boundaries. Camille never called me her boyfriend. Never asked where I was going, or who I was with. But she remembered what wine I liked, what movies I hated, and even the fact that I held my knife in my left hand even though I was right-handed. She watched, carefully, but she kept a safe distance. And I just stepped into her world, thinking I was in control. One night, we sat in the living room, watching a French black and white movie with subtitles. I didn't understand much, but Camille knew most of the lines. "Did you study French?" I asked. "My husband was a professor of French literature. I've learned a little bit." I nodded, waiting for her to tell me more, but she didn't. Instead, she stood up, poured herself some more wine, and returned to her chair. She didn't mention his name again. Ever. I wanted to ask, but there was something about the way she kept quiet that made me feel like I shouldn't break it. I started leaving little things in her house, an old sweatshirt, a travel toothbrush, socks. Camille didn't complain. She just smiled. "Are you trying to take over?" I didn't deny it, but around that time, I began to notice that there were things that didn't belong to me, but that were still there. Once, when I searched for a blanket in the downstairs closet, I found another men's shirt, a size too big for me. Dark blue, hanging on the back of the door. Dust-free, not old. Another time, when I opened a drawer to get a corkscrew, there was a Zippo lighter with the letter J, engraved on the bottom. Camille saw me looking at it. She just shrugged. Old stuff. You left it. I haven't cleaned it yet. I didn't ask, but I couldn't sleep that night. There was something in her voice, not quite a lie, but not quite the truth. I watched her sleep, wondering how many people had been in this position. I found myself starting to become what I didn't want to be, suspicious, reserved, and silent. I still went to her house. Still talking, still laughing, still sleeping over, but I began to realize something important. I had no idea who Camille was. Beyond what she had shown me. I had never met her friends. Never seen family photos. Never heard anyone call her. The house was like a showroom, perfect, discreet, and without a trace. One night, as I lay on the sofa, her head resting on my shoulder, I asked, "Do you ever feel alone?" She looked up, her eyes uncertain whether sad or cold. I lived with someone for 11 years. When he died, I realized, loneliness isn't being alone. It's being with someone you can't reach. I didn't answer, but that sentence haunted me for days. I don't know exactly when the feeling of otherness began to take root in me. It could have been when I first saw the tie hanging behind the dressing room door, a burgundy color. Not too old, but not new either. Camille didn't mention it. I didn't ask. I just folded it gently and hung it where it belonged. It could have been when I left her house at 6 a.m. to go fix the electrical system on the north side of town. When I walked down to the kitchen, I saw 2 wine glasses, washed and turned upside down on the tray, though I remembered only one of them being used the night before. I figured I might have used both, but my memory wasn't that bad. Or it could have been when I walked through the living room that evening to get my shirt, and saw the photo face down on the side table next to the sofa. A simple brown wooden frame. I couldn't see a face in it. I could just see someone trying to hide it. I didn't dare ask, not because I was afraid of Camille's anger. She wasn't, but I was afraid I'd hear answers that weren't meant for me, or worse. A counter question. Why do you think you have a right to know? Camille never said what we were. We had no titles, no boundaries, no promises. We were just presences. Something half emotional, half physical, half ritual, like an invisible, nameless contract, present but not binding. And I began to feel like I was the only one who didn't understand the rules. Once, I came unannounced, not out of suspicion, but simply because I wanted to see her. I knocked on the door. Without a key. It took Camille almost a minute to open it. She was wearing a white blouse. Her hair was slightly tousled, and she held the phone in her hand. The scent of perfume wafted from the house, not her usual scent. Instead, there was a masculine, spicy scent, the kind of cologne I found on men much better dressed than I was. Camille looked at me, not surprised. She smiled, as if I had arrived at the right time. "You're early," she said. "I've just finished work, so I'm passing by." "Good. I've just opened a bottle of Malbec. Come in." I walked in. There was something in the air I couldn't name. Like when you walk into a room where someone has just left. The warmth is there. But there's no one there. Camille went into the kitchen as if nothing had happened. I didn't ask. I just stood there and watched. That night, we drank, we talked, but I didn't stay. I said I had something early in the morning, the first lie I ever told her. In the days that followed, I tried to get back to normal. I buried myself in work, fixing an oven, checking a hot water line, installing a window sensor for a single mother. I greeted clients with a professional smile. But my mind never left the house in Rosepine Ridge. Camille still texted. She was still herself, gentle, smart, a little charming, but to me, every word she wrote began to carry a faint trail of smoke. I read more than I wrote, and I began to feel afraid. Not afraid of her, scared of myself, the way I let myself be drawn to her. Bit by bit, like a fish swallowing bait without realizing the line was taut. One Thursday night, when I arrived, Camille was playing music in the living room. Old jazz, full of saxophones. She sat on the sofa, wrapped in a green silk robe, a glass of whiskey in her hand, not wine. As usual, she gestured for me to sit next to her. "I thought you wouldn't come back," she said, not looking at me. "I thought so, too. But you did." "Yes. Why?" "I'm not sure," I said, and it was true. She turned to look at me. There was something unreadable in her eyes, not sadness. Not defiance. Just stillness. "Eli," she said, "you're a good man. And you?" I'm a woman used to the void. I didn't know what to say after that. We fell silent. An uncomfortable silence, but one that couldn't be broken. That night, as I left, I looked back at the house one last time, for the first time. It wasn't a place I wanted to return to. The message arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, while I was changing an electrical panel in a difficult customer's warehouse. "Camille. Don't come tonight. My husband is back." I stared at the screen. The words blurred before my eyes, as if my brain refused to translate them. "My husband is back." I felt a silent jolt through my chest, not because of jealousy. Not because I thought I had any rights. But because it didn't make sense. Camille had told me she'd been a widow. 3 years. Car accident. I remembered the way she sat in her chair, looking up at the ceiling. Her voice low as she told the story. It wasn't a lie. So what was this message? I typed back a simple sentence. "What do you mean?" No reply. I waited 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 30. Nothing. Finally, I put the phone back in my pocket, my hand still shaking slightly. I finished the rest of the task like a machine. My mind blank, the steps automatic, as if I were standing outside my own body. When it got dark, I drove in the opposite direction of Camille's house, turning around at the roundabout just 3 minutes later. I didn't knock. I parked a short distance from the Rose Pine Ridge entrance, turned off the lights, and waited. I had no plan. I wasn't a stalker, but part of me needed to see something, to make sense of what was burning inside me. 8:15. A black sedan slid slowly through the entrance. The driver was a man in his early 30s, with close-cropped hair, a white shirt open at the collar, and a sporty look. I didn't recognize him, but I did recognize something in the light, brown leather shoes. The kind that had been under Camille's bed. I sat still in the car, hands on the wheel, eyes on the car until it pulled up in Camille's driveway. He got out as if he had done it a dozen times before, pressing the trunk release button, grabbing a small bag, then knocking on the door. Camille opened it less than 3 seconds later. She was wearing a long-sleeved black dress, her hair down, her familiar smile. The door closed behind them, so quickly that I didn't even see her eyes darting toward the street. I'm not sure how long I sat there. All I know is that when I started the engine, my hands were cold, and my heart was broken. The next day, I didn't work. I sat in my small apartment, opened my computer, and did something I never thought I would do. I searched for Camille online. Not many results. A couple of real estate sites, where she was listed as senior interior consultant for a West Coast housing development company. A brief interview in a local magazine, taken at a model home. Not hers. No public social media. No private photos. No trace of any man who could be her husband. No one. Camille had always been a mystery. I just didn't want to see it before. I don't know what I expected when I searched for information about Camille. Maybe confirmation that the other man was really her husband. Maybe some proof that I wasn't a lovesick fool. But the more I searched, the bigger the void I found. There was no public marriage record. No obituary listing her as a widow. No photos of her with anyone else. No friends. No family. She existed as a beautiful, perfect, floating ink blot. And then I began to realize I wasn't the only one with a key. 3 days later, I returned to Rose Pine Ridge. Not to confront, not to beg, but because I needed to look the truth in the face. Needed to determine the end for myself, instead of letting it bleed silently inside. I arrived late in the afternoon. The last light of day cast long shadows across the cobblestones. Camille's house was as it always was, beautiful, quiet, and suspiciously perfect. I didn't knock. I didn't use a key. I just stood on the porch, holding a small silver key with a slightly scratched edge. Then I rang the bell. The door opened a few seconds later. Camille stood there, looking surprised, but not alarmed. She was wearing a white shirt and jeans, her hair pulled back into a bun. And she was holding a cup of coffee. "Eli," she said, her voice uncertain whether happy or sad. "I thought you wouldn't come back." "I thought so," I said, my eyes fixed on her face. We were silent for a moment. Neither of us invited the other in. "I have a question," I said. "Yes?" "Who was it?" Camille looked at me, blinking slowly once. Then she stepped aside, motioning for me to come in. I walked in, not out of trust, but because I needed closure. We sat at the dining table, where I had had my morning coffee, eaten her scrambled eggs. "You're not the first person to ask that," she said after pouring the water. I didn't want to be the one, but I had to. Camille was silent for a moment, then nodded. "His name is Joshua. We met a few months ago. He comes by sometimes." "Ex-husband?" "No, I never remarried after my husband died." I looked her straight in the eye. "So why did you text me that your husband was back?" Camille leaned back in her chair, sighing. "Because I thought you wouldn't come back if you believed I belonged to someone else. And I needed you to stop, without saying anything nasty." "So what am I?" "Eli," she began, but I held up a hand to signal that she should not use that tone, the soft, the firefighting, the vague, "I want to know." Just one sentence. She looked at me for a long time. Then she said, softly but clearly, "You are a part of my life. Like some people. No more, no less. But I like you. I feel safe when you are here." I nodded. The answer was no worse than I feared, no better than I had hoped. "The key," I said, pulling it from my pocket and setting it on the table. I thought it was an invitation to something real. Turns out, it was just a pass. Camille didn't answer, but her eyes softened for once. Without a barrier. "I'm sorry if I made you believe in something that wasn't there." I stood up. There was no anger, no yelling, no drama. There was just a quiet void opening up inside me, and the feeling that I had come full circle. "Goodbye, Camille." "Eli," she called as I walked out the door. "You're the only one who hasn't used a key so far." I turned, because I thought I needed to be invited again. Turns out, I didn't need to be invited, because it wasn't just for me. That night, I went home, opened the nightstand drawer, pulled out the second key she'd put in my hand that seemingly random afternoon. I didn't keep it. I didn't throw it away in anger. I dropped it into the small metal trash can in the corner of the kitchen, a soft ding as it hit the bottom. The end didn't have to be loud, just clear enough to be unmistakable. I stopped going to Rose Pine Ridge. Not out of anger, not out of shame, but because I understood, there are doors that, once closed, should never be opened again. Even if you have a key. Even if you believe you have a reason. In the days that followed, I went back to work as usual. I still fixed the sink for the old lady on Pine Street. Still climbed up on the roof to fix the exhaust fan in the third-floor apartment. Still used screwdrivers and drills as if Camille had never existed. No one asked me what was wrong. And I didn't say anything. Only, everything was quieter. Not outside, but inside. I didn't hear the phone ringing suddenly. No more late-night text messages. "What are you doing tonight?" No more Cabernet. No more soft jazz playing when the rain started. Just me, and the nameless emptiness, something I thought I was used to. One Friday night, I was sitting alone in a small bar outside the town center. It sold the local beer I used to like, and where I used to meet friends before Camille came along. Joel, a friend I grew up with, happened to walk in. He saw me and walked straight to the table. "Hey, are you alive? I thought you were kidnapped." I laughed, drained my glass. Maybe temporarily kidnapped. Honestly, which girl? No one else. Joel looked at me for a moment, not asking any more questions. We talked about football, work, gas prices. So normal that I almost forgot that a few months ago I thought I was in love, or being loved back. But I didn't say her name. I didn't tell the story. Not because I wanted to keep it, but because I didn't know where to start, or where to end it. I began to see Camille in the smallest details. A bottle of wine in the corner of a supermarket. A whiff of perfume in the elevator. An old song on the truck radio. I didn't try to push it away. But I didn't let myself swim back either. I let it flow. Like water, it comes and goes. One day, I was fixing a stuck lock in a used bookstore when the owner, about 40, wearing round glasses, her hands covered in paper dust, asked me, "How long have you been doing this?" "A few years," I said. "You seem to be doing it settled." I laughed. "I thought so." She nodded, as if she understood something I hadn't said. We didn't talk about it again. I realized there were people who had also walked through the emotional blind spot, where everything had no name. No rules, no promises, And when they came back, they didn't need to tell. They just keep going. One night, I was cleaning the house. No particular reason, I just felt it was time. I pulled out all the drawers, dusted, folded my clothes, sorted my tools, and in the old wooden drawer by my bed, I found a folded piece of paper in a sharp, feminine handwriting. Camille had written, "A key is only as good as the person holding it knows what he is entering." I don't remember when I received the note, or if Camille actually gave it to me. Maybe she left it in a book, or slipped it into my pocket when I wasn't looking. Camille, so full of meaning, so unspoken. I folded the note and put it in the top drawer, with the bills and papers I no longer needed. Not to throw it away, but not to read it again. At the end of the month, I got a long-term contract. Routine repairs on a chain of newly built rental apartments. The work was steady, repetitive, with few surprises, but there was something about the routine that made me feel at ease. Every morning I made my coffee early, jotted down the locations in my notebook, started the truck, and turned on the radio. No more midnight alarms, no more disorientation from reading a simple text message. I returned to my own routine, not because Camille had disappeared, but because I had decided to leave her orbit. I didn't delete her number. I didn't block her, but my phone never rang again because of that name. Maybe she understood, or maybe she had simply moved on to a new key holder. I didn't want to know. The following month, I passed through Rosepine Ridge to fix the sensor light at a nearby mansion. As I slowed around the familiar bend, I caught a glimpse of Camille's house, still standing, proud and silent among the pines, as if it had never contained anything more than wood and glass and soft lighting. I didn't turn around, I didn't stop, but part of me was grateful for that moment, because it didn't pull me back. It was just an image, not a cut. Sometimes growth doesn't come from resistance, but from the ability to not react. I started spending more time with myself, not to fill in the gaps, but to rediscover the parts of myself that had been put away for so long. I reread the books my father had left me, old technical books. Handwritten notes, yellowed paper. I repaired the wooden chair in the workshop, something I'd always meant to do but never had the time to do. I visited my mother in the nursing home more often. We didn't talk much, but she held my hand tightly each time. One day, she asked, "You seem quieter than before." I nodded. "You've just gone through something." She didn't ask what the something was. She just patted my hand gently. "It's good that you can still stand." One late autumn afternoon, I sat in my small kitchen, looking out the window. The leaves were changing color, falling in the backyard like a reminder of the passage of time. I opened my work notebook and flipped through the pages filled with appointments and notes. There were names on every page, houses, equipment, addresses, technical notes. I stopped at a blank page, and for the first time in weeks, I wrote down a name that wasn't a client's. Camille Hartman. Below, I added 2 lines. She wasn't lying to me, she just didn't tell me everything. I wasn't wrong to feel something, just wrong to believe I was the only one. I closed the notebook. No tears, no regrets, just a note to myself. To remember, but not to return. Sometimes, I still think about the key. Not about the little metal object, but about what it means. I used to think of the key as an invitation into a world, a heart, a life, but in the end, I understand. It is just an intermediary. And where you go, how long you stay, and who you become in that space, is completely independent of it. The key is never a promise. Just a temporary permission, and sometimes, a test to see if you are sane enough not to use it. I didn't use it, until I did, and then I didn't use it again. That was enough. Winter came. I bought some insulation for the windows of the workshop. The work was steady, but I was working more slowly, not because I was tired, but because I was no longer in a hurry to prove anything. Late one afternoon, I stopped at a new coffee shop near 23rd Street. The cashier had a sly smile and a familiar way of calling customers by name. As she handed me my cappuccino, she said, "You have the face of someone who has just come out of a heavy rainstorm." I laughed. "And it's drying out now, isn't it?" "A little damp," she said, "but it's definitely intact." I thanked her, took the coffee, and walked out of the shop feeling strangely lighter and more real. I'm Eli Mercer. I fix broken things, snappy doors, flickering lights, leaky faucets. I used to think the heart wasn't on the list of things that could break. Now I know, it can. And it can be fixed, in its own way, without anyone else doing it for it. Camille was part of that journey. Not a mistake, not an enemy, not a love that had been broken. Just a chapter turned, leaving the smell of old paper and a few red underlines. I closed the book. A new day began. I don't have the key anymore. Not because it's meaningless, but because I've learned that not every door that opens is for me. There are places where you walk in only to realize you should leave. Thank you for listening to my story. I appreciate it. See you soon. Team Daily Unexpected Stories.